Hey everyone, and welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. I'm Melissa Muir, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about cleaning up some of your tools that might have some minor rust issues. I recently asked a group of metalsmiths how they remove their rust, and I got some new answers that I had not heard before, so I figured I would try a few of those things out. Not too long ago, I acquired a bunch of tools, or rather inherited them, and they are older tools and well used, and several of them had a bit of rust on them. So I figured I would kind of show you how to clean these up as I was cleaning mine up. One of the new options that I had not heard of before is Never-Dull. This is something that people use for many different things. Apparently it removes rust from things like automotive trim. Sailors use it on the boats. People use it for their horses, cleaning up bridles and everything like that. So what it is it's a wadding polish. So you open it up and there's just this cloth, and it's already soaked in a solution that is to help with removing the rust. So I just remove a small portion, make sure I recap this. Because I don't really know what's in this, I figured I would wear gloves while doing some of this. What you do is, and you can see on this pair of tweezers here, I hope. See if I can get that to be in focus for you here. But there is a little bit of rust on this, and what I'm going to do is just rub it onto this. Now this pair may not be such a good example, just because not only is there rust on it, but it's also been used with a torch quite a bit. So while I am removing the rust, you can't really tell so much about the rust removal just because there's also so much oxidation. So you just kind of rub your tool, and then once you've got that done, take a soft cloth, and in this case I just took a paper towel, and you rub it and you'll remove a lot of that rust. And I don't know if you can see or not, but the redness that was on here before is now gone, and I'm just left with basically the oxidation from the torch. Alright, so for other surface rust issues, what I can do, and you'll see that it looks like they've had some fingerprints, maybe somebody's hands were wet when they were holding the tool last, or something like that. And again, this is just an older tool, it's a steel tool, so a lot of times they're just going to have some rust issues. So another thing that you can use is just a machine oil and some steel wool. In this case, my steel wool is that quadruple fine steel wool. And what I do is just put a little bit of machine oil onto my surface, and then you can use the steel wool just to kind of go over it, and it's going to work its way into the invasive rust and kind of help remove that, and then also refinish the surface a little bit. This one definitely requires a little bit more elbow grease, and again, you're only going to be able to get off of the surface for the most part. So if you've got some rust that has really invaded into the metal itself, you are going to be left with some pitting that will need to be then resurfaced with some other means. Now, other things that you can use instead of using steel wool, you can also use some emery paper or really fine grit sandpaper. You don't want to use your sandpaper too gritty, otherwise you are going to resurface your material in probably not such a desirable way. So you have a couple of options here to go in and take care of some of this rust. And again, I'm just coming back over it with this Never-Dull, and you'll see that the Never-Dull actually cleans this up a lot better than even what the steel wool did with the machine oil. So I am kind of impressed. Like I said, I've never used the Never-Dull before. Today was the first time I'd even heard of it, and I just ran over to my Ace Hardware. It's pretty much over in the cleaners area, so I found it right next to things like Comet and Barkeeper's Friend, you know, just some things like that that you would use for cleaners. So that's actually not too bad. Again, I do have some of these darker areas that have now a surface feel to them just because the rust has invaded just a little bit. Okay, so here I have one of my steaks, and you can see that there's a little bit of rust, and this just happens during shipping. Sometimes it happens when it's sitting around. Again, I've tried to remove some of it with the steel wool and machine oil, but it's not coming off too well, so I'll try this Never Dull once again on here. Now at this point, the rust in this case has not penetrated the surface too far, but it may be a little bit too far for some of the oil to get in here and be able to remove all of that. So what I do after I get to this point, once I can remove as much as possible, I like to refinish the surface, and there's a couple of ways that I will do that, and I'll show you that in just 1 second. Alright, so here I've got a pair of, I guess they're forceps cutters or whatever they are, but anyway, some scissors that, again, they had some damage to them that's gotten a little bit more invasive, so I've got some pitting that's going on in here. And so just to resurface it, what I do is I just take my little spider wheels. These are the 3M radial discs, and they work best when you work with 3 or more on a stack. So you could use one, but it's not going to work as effectively as if you have 3 to 6 of them on here. The yellow disc is, I believe, like an 80 grit. They come in different grits. They're impregnated with silicone or some different, materials for the sanding purposes. Now, I have found that these do not replace sandpaper, so it never really worked for me to use this instead of a sandpaper on my pieces. But for this purpose, when I need to resurface some of the material and remove some of the pitting, it works pretty slick for me. So what I do is I'll just come in and just very gently go over the area that has all of that pitting. Okay. And like I said, I go over the entire surface. I want to be careful about the cutting surface because I don't want to dull the scissors any more than they possibly already are. So I'm just going to remove whatever I can there. And again, you'll see that now my surface is a lot better. Now, I do have a rougher surface than maybe what I would like. So if I wanted to, I could go through progressive grits of the radial discs just like I would if I am sanding one of my pieces. And again, I'm going to take the ring mandrel here. This is actually a pretty smooth surface at this point, so I probably will rough up my mandrel a little bit, and again, if I want to get it back to this smooth surface, I would just go through various grits of my sanding discs on here. Okay, but a lot of times when I get some rust that has some pitting, this is pretty much where I go first stop. I don't even stop to remove that surface rust. I will just come in and begin to sand off some of the rust and the pitting that's happened on the surface here. Okay. Now, in the case of my steak, the steaks that I have, I've received those from Kevin Potter at Potter USA, and when he sends these steaks to you, I mean, they're finished for the most part. They're pretty polished, but they don't have a high polish on them. And there's a reason for that. One, it's just going to get dinged up anyway. And two, he leaves these steaks so that you can modify them a little bit more if you feel like you need. So perhaps I might need to reshape my end of my steak, or maybe I don't like the point or the sharpness on the end of the other side. So I mean, you can do a lot of things here. So I'm not too worried about roughing up the surface on here, because what I would do after this is, again, I would go through some progressive grits of maybe the sanding, and then I would take it to my polishing machine where I would do a round of Tripoli on a soft buff and be able to kind of clean up the surface that way. Now this one, because there was not a whole lot of invasion that happened with the rust, this one cleans up really, really nice and very fast. You'll see that all of that rust that I had now right there is gone. And again, I have a little bit of a rusty area right here. Now obviously the best thing to do is never let your tools get rusty in the first place. Okay, but it's going to happen eventually, particularly if you live in a more humid climate. So again, very, very quick, and my rust is now gone. So I've showed you how to remove the rust. What about preventing the rust? Let's talk a little bit about that. Alright, once we have all of our rust removed, the next thing we want to do is prevent it from coming back. There's a number of different things that you can use. Some people will use WD-40. I've used that before and it worked fine, and some people swear by it. But another product that I learned about a long time ago when I very first started buying some of my tools is this BioShield T9. I don't even remember where I bought it. I just Googled the BioShield T9 and found it. It's about $9 a can or something like that, if I recall correctly. It's something that was developed by Boeing for their airplanes to kind of help prevent some of the rust and corrosion on the airplanes. And it works great. Two ways that you can use this. One, you can just spray this on and leave it as a barrier protectant. So I usually will just kind of rub it on here. And you can just leave it on here and it turns into kind of a protective coating, and it basically will actually go to a powder. So you can either do that and just leave it on there, let it go to that powder, and then when you get ready to use your tool, you can just wipe that off. Or you can take your rag now and just lightly buff it off as well and leave a thin layer on your tool itself. And I have actually had great success with this. I use this on my rolling mill, on my disc cutters, on my mandrels, anything like that that's prone to rusting. I use it. I haven't used it so much on my small tools, but definitely on my larger tools that I have rust issues. So again, there's a number of things that you can use, but these are some of the things that have worked well for me.